Are you using resistance bands but not sure if you're actually getting stronger? You're not the only one. With no weight stacks or numbers or poundages to track, it can feel like you're just guessing. But not anymore. In this video, I'm going to show you 4 clear ways to track your progress with bands so that you know you're making progress and getting stronger. Progression is the foundation to every great training program. If you're not getting stronger, you're just going through the motions. And it doesn't happen by accident. Whether you're training with free weights or bands, you need to track your progress. So let's start with tracking method number 1, band size and setup configuration. Now with Clench Fitness bands, we sell loop style resistance bands, and whatever, they're the same as a lot of the other ones on the market in terms of they're a continuous loop, and we have a 41-inch lay flat length. We also have a 34-inch lay flat length. We have a 13-inch lay flat length. And ultimately, with each length, whether it's 41-inch, 34-inch, 13-inch, we have different sizes of bands with that same length. And what changes with that is the width of each band and the thickness. So as we go up in resistance, the band will get wider and sometimes thicker. And what that does is there's more band, there's more cross-sectional area, so it's going to put out more force as you stretch it. It's going to be hard. The band is more resistant to you stretching it. Now, with resistance bands, the big thing or the key difference with them versus like a free weight or something is that the further you stretch the band, the more resistance they output. So at the start of the rep, it's lighter. Then as I go through the rep, it's going to continuously get progressively more difficult to stretch. And at Clench, we obviously understand that fully, and we want to be as transparent as possible. So we publish complete calibration tables or resistance versus stretch tables for each level of resistance band so that you can look like, hey, if I stretched the red band 14 inches, it's going to put out this exact resistance. And that's true for every one of our bands in that category, 41-inch, 34-inch, whatever. There's one variable, and then the next variable is the configuration of the band. And what do I mean by that? So there's 2 main configurations. The first is the full length configuration, which is basically taking a band in its full length, anchoring at one end, and then stretching it like this. So that is going to create one type of resistance versus stretch curve. And then another common way to set the band up is using it doubled over or folded in half. Like if, for instance, if I'm folding it in half, tucking it under my feet and stretching it for like a deadlift, or I can fold it in half through an anchor point and then stretch it, it's going to put out basically twice the resistance as if it's in the full length configuration. So we publish 2 charts on our website for all the product pages, the full length stretch method, resistance versus stretch, and the doubled over resistance versus stretch. So that is probably one of the key ways that you can track your progress. And so when you're setting this up, when you're looking at exercises and tracking, make sure that you note what band size you're using, and if it's in the full length configuration or if it's a doubled over configuration. So that way, basically you're being as consistent as possible in the setup, and you're comparing like apples to apples every week. You're comparing what you did last week to what you did this week in the same exact manner, so you know if you're making progress or not. So that brings me to tracking method number 2, and this is like the common tracking method for all of training. You're going to want to track your volume and your tempo. What does that mean? You're tracking sets and reps for a given exercise. Like I'm doing chest press this week, I'm doing 3 sets of 5 on the chest press. That is sets and reps. And then tempo is the speed at which you're doing the rep. And you can track that a few different ways depending on how detailed you want to get. Like you can track your concentric time, 1 second up, 1 second isometric at the top, and then 3 seconds down if you really want to get like super granular. Or you can get a little bit more broad and just say like a slow rep or a fast rep, or you can record like the total time for your set or the total time for each rep, like a 3-second rep or a 30-second set of 5. like whatever you're doing there, because tempo does matter. The more you slow that rep down and hold it like time under tension, you're not going to be as strong as just banging out like a quick concentric rep. And that should be pretty intuitive. So yeah, that is basically the other component that you're gonna track. So with bands, again, just to recap, you're gonna track the band size that you're using for the exercise, the configuration, whether it's full length or doubled over, and then of course, sets, reps, and some kind of tempo, general tempo thing so that you can understand like how fast you did the reps this week compared to last week. And that should give you a really good foundation for tracking your progress, and you can measure it week over week. All right, so that brings us into tracking method number 3, anchor point placement. Now this one is a little bit more complicated, and it pertains only to resistance bands. So I'm gonna start simple, and then I'll kind of expand on it a little bit more, and then we'll go into the number 4 after that. So take, for instance, a wall anchor point, whether this could be anything that you anchor to, whether it's a wall or a pole or whatever. The floor, doesn't matter. But what does matter is your distance, your working distance from this anchor point. So if I step back here and start where I just have enough tension in the band and do a chest fly, and versus taking another step or 2 out, I'm gonna have more resistance the further I stretch this band. So basically understanding how far you are from the anchor point and doing that consistently, or at least monitoring the where you're at each week, will make a difference, because it's going to be more resistance. So like for example, in the first week, you may start out here, and then in the second week, you take another half a step forward, stretch that band maybe another 3 or 4 inches, and then you have more resistance because you can't quite jump up to the next band, the black band that's above this, but you still want to do more resistance. So you can easily just take another step away from the anchor point, as long as you're not overstretching your band, and do that, and that is a form of progression. But you have to be able to track that, because if you don't track that, you'll be missing out on some potential progress. And now, of course, like you're gonna say, yeah, I'm not always anchored to the wall, or I'm using something else, or I'm standing on the band. That, of course, matters as well. So let's take, for instance, like a shoulder press, where if I stand on the band and I'm standing on it with one foot, grabbing the band in my hand, and I'm doing an overhead press here. So this is the full length stretch method, but the active or working length of the band is still fairly long here. But now I could also set this exercise up where I put both feet in the single band, and now I'm pressing this overhead with both arms. So 2 things have changed here. One, I've gone from a unilateral single arm exercise to a bilateral. So now the amount of resistance that I'm doing has basically been cut in half, because now we're spreading that load out between 2 different limbs. But also I have effectively changed the working length of the band, because this band that's between my feet is no longer in the working length of the band. So I've effectively shortened the band, because now the band is anchored here and here. This part of the band isn't doing anything, so it's going to have more resistance than it did when the whole band was basically, or there's a lot less band trapped under my single foot versus when I have 2 feet in it. So ultimately, you're not going to get super detailed and be like, I was standing with my feet 3 inches apart and blah, 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 because like no one's going to do that. What really matters here is that you set the exercise up the exact same way each week, or you at least note what you're changing so that you can understand, like, okay, I still did the red band, but this week I was doing single arm. Last week I did it with a single band and a dual overhead press. So I'm technically doing a little bit less weight this week than I was last week in that specific case. Just as long as you're tracking it, and you want to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. So doing the exercise consistently each week in the same setup, and then tracking any little minimal changes that you may make to give yourself more or less resistance, that will allow you to track progress. All right, so that brings me to the last point here, tracking method number 4, which is using accessories and adjusting tension with the accessories, because that will matter. That affects the band tension, and it's a setup thing again. And the moral of the story remains the same. Maintain a consistent setup week to week, and then you won't have to worry as much about tracking all these little nuances. You can just track like the same, I did a red band last week, I did an orange band the previous week, and now I'm going to try a black band this week. Or if you can't do that, you may stack multiple bands together or whatever to try to bump that up. So let's go through some examples here so you understand like how accessories affect the tension in the bands. So one of our big accessories is the clench band handle. It's designed to help take up slack in the band and give you more tension in the range of motion. For instance, like if I do a bicep curl here, I don't really have any tension at the bottom of the rep. So what I'm going to want to do is wrap this band around maybe an extra 1 or 2 times so that I have tension in the bottom of the rep. But now when I did that, I have shortened the working length of the band, increased my resistance so that I have a full, nice resistance profile where I have tension at the bottom, pulling my arm straight, and then I'm coming up through the curl and feeling that resistance all the way through. Now, as long as I track it and set it up the same, I'm putting it under 1 foot, I wrapped it around the handle 1 time, I know that I did this for 10 reps this week. And next week, say I want to bump it up. There's a few different ways to do that. I could try to wrap the band around an additional time, as long as I still have enough left that I'm not overstretching the band. That might be borderline for some of this, or for people that are taller. Another thing that you could do is kind of like step on it with 1 foot and then put another foot here. That's effectively shortening that working length down and giving me more tension, and I'm doing it that way. But now you'll have to monitor, like, is this more or less resistance than I did last week with a different setup? So that's where the setup and the accessory setup really makes a difference, is how much tension you're taking and how you're changing that working length of the band. And again, it's just basically like, find a consistent way to set it up and then make a minimal change as you're progressing through, so that you can easily track those changes and understand that whether you're increasing the resistance or decreasing the resistance. So that's the band handle. Another common accessory that we have is our foot plate, which makes shortening the band and changing tension very easy. One big way to do that is, say we put the band underneath the plate, and now if we're doing whatever exercise that we're doing, doesn't really matter. We know that we have this set up. Our band is going underneath the long channel, so there's a certain amount of length that's being kind of taken up here, and there's a certain resistance profile that's created. If I wanted to change that resistance, I could change the direction or the channel that the band is in. So now it's in a narrower channel, so I'm going to have less resistance doing the same exercise with this configuration. So again, it's just making sure that you understand exactly how you're setting an exercise up and doing it consistently week to week, so that as you're increasing the band size or stacking bands together, you make sure that you're not adding any additional variables that are changing that resistance in your exercise. Okay, so last tip is to make sure that you're actually writing this down or recording it somewhere, so that you can look back at your progress week over week. And obviously a 1 week difference may not be very trackable, or there's going to be a lot more variability, because week to week there's a lot of things that can change, and the amount of progress that you make in a given week isn't very large. So it might feel like you're not making progress from 1 week to the next, but if you track multiple weeks, longer time periods, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 week periods, that's where you're going to start to see the trend. Like that is the key of progression, is what is the trend over a long period of time? Is it trending upwards or is it trending downwards? And there's going to be some noise in that, right? Like there's going to be peaks and valleys as you're going through this. Every week isn't going to be the same, between your diet and what could have happened that day and your other activity levels for that day. You may not, and how you may change up the exercises a little bit, or your order or whatever. There's always those variables that are going to create noise in that curve. It's never just going to be like a straight up linear curve. It's, you know, there's going to be peaks and valleys, but over time you're going to be able to see that trend going upwards. And that's what we want to see. So you have to make sure you're writing this down week over week. Myself, I just do it very simply in my phone and my notes app. I just track it, write down, you know, the exercise is the main thing, and then every week I just write down sets, reps, and the band that I use, because I know that I'm being consistent in where I'm placing it. Or if there's notes, like if I did a really slow tempo, I will make sure to note that on a certain exercise, so that I know, like, yeah, I didn't get as many reps this week as I did last week, but I slowed it down a lot more, so I know that's going to be harder. And then next week I might go back and run the same tempo that I did 2 weeks, so I can compare those together. Stuff like that is just little notes. You don't have to get and make this complicated. Like, keep it as simple as possible, but still track the key variables, which again is sets, reps, exercise, setup, and the band size, as well as the distance from your anchor point. Another thing with the distance on your anchor point, you don't have to like measure, hey, I'm gonna stand, you know, 17 inches away from the anchor point. You don't have to do that. You say, like, I took 3 steps out last week, this week was 4 steps. Or use reference points. Like, hey, today I went out to the corner of my squat rack. Now I'm halfway between the 2 posts of my squat rack. Stuff like that. Just keep it simple and condense your notes down as much as possible so that you will be consistent with it, because that is the key. All right, so there's 4 tips, 4 methods for how you can track your progress with bands and actually know you're gaining strength, because that is ultimately what matters. And that's my take on it. That's my quick summary, but I would love to hear, because I know there's a lot of people out there that geek out on bands like as much as we do. So share in the comments like your favorite ways to track something. I know some of our customers have sent us like cool spreadsheets that they made, or apps, or whatever. Share that down in the comments below, because we want to share this with other people. We want to help you track your progress and actually make progress. So if you liked what you saw today, be sure to smash that like button. Also, if you need any of the bands or accessories that we talked about today, head over to clenchfitness.com. We'd be happy to hook you up. And if you want to see more videos like this, check out the on-screen links. We have tons and tons of video to help you get better at home with your training, whether it's bands or weights. We got stuff for you. And thank you so much for watching.